The spit hit Denise's cheek like a slap from hell itself. She stood frozen in her own living room, watching the saliva slide down her dark skin while her 6-year-old son Jaden clutched his superhero birthday cake, his little brown eyes wide with terror. The woman standing next to her husband, a tall, light-skinned stranger with red lipstick and a cruel smile, threw her head back and laughed like she owned the world. "You heard what I said, didn't you?" The woman named Candace sneered, her voice sharp as broken glass. "You're his greatest mistake. Always have been. Always will be." Robert, the man Denise had loved for 8 years, married for 5, just stood there. His dark face showed nothing. No shame. No sorry. Nothing. Like watching his wife get hurt was just another Tuesday. The living room felt too small. The balloons Denise had hung that morning, bright blue and yellow ones that said, "Happy 6th birthday," seemed to mock her now. She had spent 3 hours making Jaden's favorite chocolate cake from scratch. Had cleaned the house until it sparkled. Had invited the neighbors and family over for 2 p.m. It was 1:30 p.m. The guests would arrive soon. "Mama?" Jaden's small voice cut through the thick air. He was still holding his cake, but his hands were shaking. "Mama, why is Daddy being mean to you?" Denise wanted to run. Wanted to grab her baby and disappear. But her feet wouldn't move. 8 years of her life with this man. 8 years of believing his lies about working late. 8 years of thinking she wasn't pretty enough, smart enough, good enough for him to love her the way she loved him. "Pack your things," Robert finally spoke, his voice flat and cold. "Both of you. I want you out by tonight." "This is my house too," Denise whispered, her voice barely there. "We bought this together. Jaden lives here. His toys are here. His room." "Not anymore," Candace cut her off, walking over to the mantel where Denise's family photos sat. She picked up the wedding picture. Denise in her grandmother's pearl dress, Robert looking handsome in his black suit, and dropped it. The glass shattered across the hardwood floor. Jaden started crying. Not the loud wailing of a hurt child, but the quiet, scared crying that broke Denise's heart into a million pieces. That's when something inside Denise shifted. She had been quiet her whole life. The good girl who never caused trouble. The woman who made sure everyone else was happy before herself. The wife who believed that love meant accepting whatever scraps she was given. But watching her baby cry, seeing the fear in his innocent eyes, made something fierce wake up in her chest. She walked slowly to where Jaden stood and gently took the cake from his trembling hands. She set it on the coffee table, then knelt down to his level. "Baby," she said softly, wiping his tears with her thumb. "Go to your room and pack your favorite toys in your backpack. Just the special ones, okay?" "But Mama, it's my birthday," Jaden whispered. "And all my friends are coming." "I know, sweet boy. And we're still going to celebrate. Just somewhere else." Jaden looked confused but nodded. He was a smart little boy who understood more than he should have to. As he walked toward his room, Denise stood up and faced her husband. "You want me gone? Fine." Her voice was steadier now. "But don't you ever, disrespect me in front of our son again." Robert laughed, but it sounded forced. "What are you gonna do about it?" Denise looked around the living room. At the life she had built. The home she had made beautiful with second-hand furniture and dollar store decorations. The kitchen where she had cooked 1,000 meals. The couch where she and Robert used to watch movies before Candace came along. "I'm going to show our son what strength looks like," she said. She walked to the kitchen and grabbed 2 trash bags from under the sink. Her hands were steady now. Her mind was clear. She had $347 in her checking account. Her car was in her name. She had a job at the grocery store that didn't pay much but would have to do. She thought about her sister Shayla who lived across town. About Ms. Ruby, the old lady next door who always said Denise was too good for Robert. About all the time she had made excuses for this man who never deserved them. As she walked to her bedroom to pack, she could hear Candace talking about redecorating. About getting rid of all the tacky stuff Denise had chosen. About making the house into something classy. Let her have it, Denise thought. Let her have a man who could spit on the mother of his child. Let her have someone who could destroy a little boy's birthday party without blinking. Denise grabbed her clothes from the closet. Work uniforms, church dresses, the few nice things she owned. She packed her mother's jewelry, her grandmother's Bible, the photo of her parents who had died in a car crash when she was 19. From Jaden's room, she could hear him talking to his stuffed elephant, Peanut. "We're going on an adventure, Peanut. Mama says we're still gonna have cake." Her heart squeezed tight. This little boy trusted her completely. Believed she could make everything okay. And somehow she would have to find a way to do exactly that. When she finished packing, she found Jaden sitting on his bed with his backpack, Peanut tucked under one arm. "Ready, baby?" He nodded, then looked up at her with those big, serious eyes. "Mama, are we ever coming back?" Denise knelt down and took his small hands in hers. She wanted to tell him yes. Wanted to promise that Daddy would come to his senses and they could all be a family again. But looking into her son's face, she knew she had to tell him the truth. "No, sweet boy. We're going to find a new place to call home." "Will Daddy visit us?" The question cut deep. Because Denise knew Robert. Knew how he could love something one day and forget it existed the next. Knew that once they walked out that door, he would convince himself that letting them go was the right thing to do. "We'll see," she said, because it was the only answer she could give. They walked through the living room one last time. Candace was on the couch now, feet up on the coffee table, acting like she belonged there. Robert was on his phone, probably canceling the party guests. Neither of them looked up as Denise and Jaden headed for the door. Just as Denise reached for the handle, there was a knock. She opened it to find Mrs. Henderson from down the street, holding a wrapped present and smiling wide. "Happy birthday, Jaden," Mrs. Henderson said, then noticed the bags in Denise's hands. "Oh, are you going somewhere?" Denise felt her cheeks burn with shame. How do you explain to your neighbor that your life just fell apart? How do you tell someone who brought a gift that there's no party anymore? "Change of plans," she said quietly. Mrs. Henderson looked past Denise and saw Robert and Candace in the living room. Her smile faded. She was an older black woman who had seen enough of life to understand what was happening without explanation. "I see," she said softly. Then she knelt down to Jaden's level. "Well, birthday boy, would you like to have your party at my house instead? I've got ice cream in the freezer and a backyard perfect for running around." Jaden looked up at his mama, hope flickering in his eyes. Denise wanted to say no. Wanted to handle this on her own. Wanted to protect her pride and not burden anyone else with her problems. But looking at her son's face, she realized that sometimes accepting help wasn't weakness. Was love. "That would be very kind," she whispered. Mrs. Henderson stood up and put a gentle hand on Denise's shoulder. "Honey," she said quietly, "you're stronger than you know. And that little boy is lucky to have a mama like you." As they walked across the yard to Mrs. Henderson's house, Denise could feel Robert watching from the window. She didn't look back. Didn't give him the satisfaction of seeing her break. But inside she was terrified. She had no idea how she was going to take care of Jaden on her own. No idea where they would sleep tonight. No idea how to explain to a 6-year-old why his daddy didn't love them anymore. All she knew was that she had to try. Had to find a way to give her son the life he deserved. Had to prove to herself that she was more than Robert's greatest mistake. She was Jaden's whole world. And somehow that had to be enough. 2 weeks later, Denise sat in her car outside the Walmart where she worked, staring at the eviction notice that had been waiting for her at her sister Shayla's apartment. The paper shook in her hands as she read it again, hoping the words would change. But they didn't. 3 days to find somewhere else to stay. Shayla had been kind to let them crash on her couch, but her tiny one-bedroom place wasn't meant for 3 people. The walls were thin, the neighbors loud, and Jaden couldn't sleep through the night. He kept asking when they were going home, and Denise kept running out of ways to explain that they didn't have one anymore. Her phone buzzed with a text from Robert. "Jaden can stay with me weekends if you want." She wanted. Like spending time with his son was a favor to her instead of his responsibility. She deleted the message without responding. "Mama, I'm hungry," Jaden said from the back seat. He was coloring in a book Mrs. Henderson had given him, but she could hear the tiredness in his voice. They had been living on fast food and whatever Shayla had in her kitchen. It wasn't enough for a growing boy. "I know, baby. Mama's going to work now and then we'll get you something good to eat." She had picked up extra shifts, working mornings at Walmart and evenings cleaning offices downtown. The money still wasn't enough. After paying Shayla for groceries and gas for her car, there was barely anything left. Certainly not enough for a deposit on an apartment. The October air was getting cold and Denise knew they couldn't keep living like this. Jaden needed stability. Needed his own bed and space to play. Needed to feel safe again. As she walked into Walmart, her manager Mr. Pete called her over to his office. Pete was a short white man with kind eyes who had always been fair to her. "Denise, you've been doing good work," he said, closing the door behind them. "Real good work. I got a position opening up in the office, data entry Monday through Friday, better pay. You interested?" Denise felt tears prick her eyes. Better pay meant she could maybe afford a small apartment. Monday through Friday meant she could be home with Jaden in the evenings. "Yes, sir. Very interested." "Good. You start next Monday. And Denise. Pete handed her an envelope. This is just between us, okay? Inside was $500 cash. Denise looked up at him, confused. My wife heard about your situation from Mrs. Henderson. We know what it's like to struggle. Consider it a loan until you get on your feet. Denise wanted to refuse. Wanted to say she could handle things on her own. But looking at Pete's genuine face, she realized this was another moment where accepting help was the right thing to do. Thank you, she whispered. I'll pay you back. When you can. No rush. That evening, Denise drove to the other side of town to look at a small duplex she had found in the classified ads. The neighborhood wasn't fancy, small houses with chain-link fences and older cars in driveways, but it looked safe. Kids were playing in front yards while their mamas sat on porches talking and laughing. The duplex was tiny. 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, a kitchen barely big enough for 2 people. But it had good bones. Clean floors. Windows that let in light. A small backyard where Jaden could play. The landlord was an older black man named Mr. Curtis who looked at Denise with understanding eyes when she explained her situation. Single mama? He asked. Yes, sir. Working? Yes, sir. Just got promoted to office work at Walmart. Mr. Curtis nodded slowly. Rent's $650 a month. Usually I ask for first month, last month, and security deposit up front. But I can work with you. First month and half the security deposit now, rest when you get your first paycheck from the new job. Denise wanted to cry with relief. With Pete's $500 and what she had saved, she could just barely make it work. Thank you, she said. We'll take good care of it. I know you will. And that little boy of yours, he can play in the backyard anytime. My grandkids come over on weekends. He'll have friends to play with. Moving day was just Denise, Jaden, and Shayla loading boxes into her car. It didn't take long, they didn't have much. But walking into their new place, Denise felt something she hadn't felt in months. Oh. Jaden ran from room to room, his voice echoing off the empty walls. Mama, this is our house? Just ours. Just ours, baby. That first night, they slept on air mattresses on the living room floor. Denise had bought them at the dollar store along with sheets and pillows. It wasn't much, but it was theirs. As Jaden slept beside her, Denise stared at the ceiling and thought about how far they had come. 2 weeks ago, she had been a woman who let her husband spit on her. Tonight, she was a woman who had found her own place, gotten a better job, and was building a life for her son. She thought about calling Robert to tell him their new address, then decided against it. If he wanted to see Jaden, he could make the effort to find them. The next morning, there was a knock at the door. Denise opened it to find an elderly black woman with silver hair and a warm smile, holding a covered dish. I'm Ruby Jones, the woman said. I live next door. Thought you and your boy might be hungry. The dish was full of fried chicken, mac and cheese, and green beans that smelled like heaven. Denise's stomach growled just looking at it. Thank you so much, but I can't. Yes, you can, Ms. Ruby said firmly but kindly. Every mother needs help sometimes. That's what community is for. She stepped inside without being invited, looking around the empty space with approving eyes. Good bones, she said, just like Mr. Curtis had. This place just needs some love. Over the next few days, things started happening that Denise couldn't explain. A couch appeared on her front porch with a note that said, from a friend. Someone left bags of groceries by her door. Jaden found a bicycle in the backyard, small and painted bright red, perfect for a 6-year-old. When Denise asked Ms. Ruby about it, the older woman just smiled and said, sometimes blessings come when you need them most. Denise started her new job on Monday, and it was everything Pete had promised. The work was easy, entering numbers into a computer, and her coworkers were friendly. She had her own desk in a quiet office and could eat lunch without rushing. For the first time in months, she felt like a professional instead of just someone trying to survive. At lunch on her second day, she called to check on Jaden. Ms. Ruby had offered to watch him after school until Denise got home. Another kindness that Denise was learning to accept. He's fine, baby, Ms. Ruby said. Smart as a whip, that boy. We're working on his homework and then we're going to make cookies. When Denise got home that evening, she found Jaden and Ms. Ruby in her kitchen, flour everywhere, both of them laughing. Jaden's face was covered in chocolate, and he looked happier than she had seen him since before the birthday party. Mama, Ms. Ruby taught me how to make cookies, and she said we can plant flowers in the backyard. Looking at her son's joy, Denise felt something settling in her chest. Not happiness exactly, she was still too hurt and scared for that. But something like peace. They were going to be okay. She didn't know how she knew, but she did. They had found more than just a place to live. They had found a community. Found people who cared about them not because they had to, but because they chose to. That night, after Jaden was asleep in his own bed, a twin mattress they had bought at a thrift store and made up with superhero sheets, Denise sat in her living room and thought about Robert. She wondered if he missed them. If he ever thought about Jaden's laugh or the way he used to crawl into their bed on Sunday mornings. If he regretted throwing away 8 years for a woman who probably didn't know how to make his coffee the way he liked it or remember that he was allergic to shellfish. But for the first time since that awful day, thinking about Robert didn't make her chest tight with pain. It made her feel something else. Grateful. Grateful that he had shown his true self before Jaden got older and the hurt cut deeper. Grateful that she had been forced to find her own strength instead of depending on someone who didn't deserve her love. Grateful that they had ended up here, in this small duplex with Ms. Ruby next door and a community that embraced them. She was still his greatest mistake, apparently. But that was okay. Because leaving him was the greatest gift she had ever given herself. 3 months into their new life, Denise stood in the Walmart break room staring at her phone in disbelief. The number on her bank account screen had to be wrong. She blinked hard and looked again, but it was still there. $1,247.23. She had never had that much money in her account at one time in her entire life. The new job was everything Pete had promised and more. Steady hours, decent pay, and co-workers who treated her with respect. She had even gotten a small raise after just 2 months when her supervisor noticed how accurate and fast she was with data entry. But the real change wasn't the money. It was how she felt when she looked in the mirror each morning. Like a woman who mattered. Like someone who could handle whatever life threw at her. "You look happy," said Carmen, one of her co-workers, settling into the chair next to her with her lunch. Carmen was a Puerto Rican woman about Denise's age with 3 kids of her own and a laugh that could fill a room. "I guess I am," Denise said, realizing it was true. "Good for you, girl. You deserve it." They had become friends over shared lunches and stories about single motherhood. Carmen's husband had left her when their youngest was born with special needs, and she understood the particular exhaustion of carrying everything alone. "Speaking of happy," Carmen said with a sly smile, "you know David from shipping has been asking about you." Denise felt her cheeks warm. David was a tall, dark-skinned man with gentle eyes and calloused hands who always held the door for her and asked about Jaden. He was kind in a quiet way that reminded her of her father. "Carmen, I'm not ready for that. I'm not saying marry the man. I'm saying maybe it's okay to remember that you're a woman and not just a mama." Before Denise could respond, her phone rang. It was Ms. Ruby, which was unusual. The older woman usually waited until evening to check in. "Ms. Ruby? Everything okay?" "Oh, baby," Ms. Ruby's voice was tight with worry. "You need to come home. There's been some trouble." Denise's heart stopped. "Is Jaden hurt?" No, the baby's fine. He's right here with me. But you need to come home." Denise told Pete she had a family emergency and drove home faster than she should have. When she pulled up to the duplex, she saw immediately what Ms. Ruby meant by trouble. Someone had thrown rocks through both front windows. Glass covered her porch and she could see into her living room where everything was scattered and broken. The couch that had appeared as a gift was slashed open, stuffing everywhere. Her small TV was smashed. But worse than the damage was the word spray painted across her front door in red letters, "Whore." Denise sat in her car, shaking. She knew who had done this. Only one person was angry enough, hurt enough in his pride to do something this cruel. Ms. Ruby came out of her house with Jaden's hand in hers. The little boy looked scared but not hurt, and that was all that mattered to Denise in that moment. "Baby, I already called the police," Ms. Ruby said as Denise got out of her car. "And Mr. Curtis is on his way with some plywood to cover the windows." "Did anyone see who did it?" Denise asked, though she already knew the answer. Mrs. Patterson from across the street saw a dark blue sedan around noon. Said it looked like someone was watching the house before this happened. Robert's car was dark blue. The police officer who came to take the report was a young black woman who looked at the damage with sympathetic eyes. She took photos and notes, but Denise could tell from her expression that without witnesses or security cameras, there wasn't much they could do. "Do you have any idea who might have done this?" the officer asked. Denise looked at Jaden, who was coloring quietly at Ms. Ruby's kitchen table where they had retreated while the officer worked. She thought about telling the truth, that her ex-husband was probably responsible, that he had a key to their old house and knew where they lived now. But then she thought about Jaden having to testify against his father. About court dates and lawyers she couldn't afford. About the look on her son's face if he knew his daddy had done this. "No," she lied. "No idea." After the officer left, Denise sat on Ms. Ruby's porch and cried. Not the quiet, dignified tears she had shed the night Robert kicked them out. These were big, ugly sobs that came from deep in her chest. "Let it out, baby," Ms. Ruby said, rubbing her back like Denise's own mother used to do. "Let it all out." "I thought we were safe," Denise gasped between sobs. "I thought we had found somewhere he couldn't hurt us." "You're safe. This is just stuff, baby. Just things that can be replaced. You and that boy, you're still whole. You're still strong. And you're not facing this alone." As if to prove her point, people started showing up. Mr. Curtis arrived with plywood and tools. Mrs. Patterson from across the street brought dinner for everyone. 2 men from down the block appeared with a new TV still in the box. Carmen showed up after work with cleaning supplies and 3 of her cousins who looked like they could handle any trouble that came their way. "Nobody messes with our girl," Carmen announced, rolling up her sleeves. By the end of the evening, the windows were boarded up temporarily, the glass was cleaned up, and the living room was put back together. Someone had even painted over the ugly word on the door. Jaden had spent the day playing with the neighborhood kids who had gathered to watch the activity, and by bedtime he seemed to think the whole thing had been an adventure. "Mama, why did someone break our windows?" he asked as Denise tucked him into bed. "Sometimes people do mean things when they're angry," she said carefully. "But look how many people came to help us fix it. That's what matters. Are we going to move again?" The question broke her heart, because she could hear the worry in his voice. The fear that just when things felt stable, everything would change again. "No, baby. This is our home. And we have friends here who care about us. We're staying." After Jaden fell asleep, Denise sat in her living room and looked around at what people had done for them. The furniture was mismatched but comfortable. The new TV was bigger than the one that had been broken. Someone had even brought flowers for the coffee table. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Hope you learned your lesson." This time Denise didn't delete it. She screenshotted it and sent it to the police officer who had taken the report, along with a message explaining who she suspected was behind the vandalism. Then she blocked the number and turned off her phone. She wasn't going to live in fear anymore. Wasn't going to let Robert's anger poison the life she was building for herself and Jaden. If he wanted to play games, he would discover that she wasn't the same scared woman he had spit on 4 months ago. The next morning, Denise called in late to work and went to the courthouse downtown. She filled out paperwork for a restraining order, documenting every incident she could remember: the birthday party humiliation, the eviction with no notice, and now the vandalism. The clerk, a middle-aged black woman with kind eyes, looked over the papers with a frown. "Honey, this man put his hands on you?" "No, ma'am. Just emotional abuse. And now this. Emotional abuse is still abuse. And destruction of property is a crime. You did the right thing coming here." That afternoon, Denise got a call from a lawyer, a woman named Jessica Torres who specialized in family law and domestic violence cases. "Mrs. Patterson? I got your name from the courthouse. I understand you're dealing with harassment from your ex-husband?" "I can't afford a lawyer," Denise said immediately. "I work with a nonprofit that provides free legal services to women in situations like yours. Would you be willing to meet with me?" 2 days later, Denise sat in Jessica's small but neat office, telling her story from the beginning. Jessica listened without judgment, taking notes and asking careful questions. "Here's what we're going to do," Jessica said when Denise finished. "First, we're going to get that restraining order approved. Second, we're going to file for formal custody arrangements so he can't just disappear from Jaden's life and then show up causing trouble. Third, we're going to make sure he pays child support like he's supposed to." "I don't want his money," Denise said quickly. "This isn't about you wanting it. It's about Jaden deserving it. That money can go into a college fund if you don't need it for daily expenses. But your son has a right to financial support from both his parents." Walking out of Jessica's office, Denise felt something she hadn't felt since the night Robert told her to pack her things. Powerful. Not because she was going after Robert for revenge, but because she was finally protecting herself and Jaden the way a mother should. She was setting boundaries. She was demanding the respect they deserved. That evening, she found David from work waiting by her car when her shift ended. "I heard about what happened to your place," he said quietly. "I wanted to make sure you and your boy were okay." "We're fine," she said, but she was touched that he cared enough to check. "Good. And Denise? If you ever need anything, and I mean anything, you call me, okay?" He handed her a piece of paper with his phone number written in careful handwriting. "I don't know if I'm ready for—" she started. "I'm not asking you to be ready for anything," David said gently. I'm just saying you don't have to handle everything by yourself anymore. You got people who care about you. That night, Denise put David's number on her refrigerator next to Ms. Ruby's and Carmen's and Jessica's. She looked at the collection of phone numbers, her support system, her safety net, and smiled. For months ago she had felt completely alone in the world. Now she had a community. And for the first time since Robert had broken her heart, she was beginning to believe that maybe, someday she might be ready to let someone put it back together. 6 months after the vandalism, Denise stood in family court wearing her best dress, a navy blue one she had bought at a thrift store and tailored herself, watching Robert squirm in his seat as Jessica Torres laid out the facts of their case. He had lost weight since she had seen him last. His suit was wrinkled and there were dark circles under his eyes. Candace was nowhere to be seen, and Denise wondered briefly if that relationship had already burned itself out. "Your Honor," Jessica was saying, "my client has not received a single child support payment in the 7 months since separation. Mr. Patterson has made no effort to establish a relationship with his son, and has in fact engaged in harassment and property destruction." Robert's lawyer, a tired-looking white man who kept checking his watch, shuffled through papers without much enthusiasm. "Furthermore," Jessica continued, "we have evidence that Mr. Patterson has been deliberately avoiding service of court documents and hiding assets to avoid his financial responsibilities." Denise felt a flutter of nerves in her stomach. She had never been in a courtroom before, and the formal atmosphere made everything feel more real, more final. The judge, an older black woman with silver hair and sharp eyes, looked between the two lawyers with obvious impatience. "Mr. Patterson," she said directly to Robert, "you've been ordered to appear in this court 3 times. This is your first appearance. Why should I not hold you in contempt?" Robert stood up, trying to look confident but failing. "Your Honor, I've been dealing with some personal issues. Health problems and—" "Save it," the judge cut him off. "I've heard every excuse in the book. What I want to know is why you think you can father a child and then disappear when it's convenient for you." Denise watched Robert's face turn red with embarrassment and felt nothing. No satisfaction. No anger. Just a kind of sad acceptance that this man she had once loved was exactly who he had always been. "Your Honor," Robert's lawyer tried again, "my client is willing to work out a reasonable arrangement for both custody and support." The judge looked at her paperwork. 7 months of no contact with the child. 7 months of no financial support. Property damage at the mother's residence. A restraining order that he violated twice. She looked up at Robert with disgust. "What exactly makes you think you deserve custody rights?" "He's my son," Robert said weakly. "Being a biological father and being a daddy are 2 very different things," the judge replied sharply. "One requires nothing but functioning anatomy. The other requires showing up." In the end, the judge's ruling was swift and decisive. Robert would pay $400 a month in child support, with wage garnishment to ensure compliance. He would have supervised visitation rights only 2 hours every other weekend at the family court facility, and only if he completed anger management classes first. "And Mr. Patterson," the judge added as they prepared to leave, "if you violate that restraining order again, if you damage Ms. Brown's property again, if you cause any further harassment, you will be spending time in my jail. Do I make myself clear?" "Yes, ma'am." Outside the courthouse, Jessica walked Denise to her car. "How do you feel?" the lawyer asked. Denise thought about it. "Free," she said finally. "I feel free." She had taken back her maiden name, Brown, during the proceedings. She was no longer Mrs. Patterson, tied to a man who had never deserved the title of husband. She was Denise Brown again, the woman she had been before she lost herself in someone else's selfishness. That evening she and Jaden sat in their backyard, their real backyard now, with flowers Ms. Ruby had helped them plant and a small garden where they grew tomatoes and herbs. Jaden was 7 now, taller and more serious than he had been a year ago, but still her sweet boy. "Mama, is Daddy going to come see me now?" he asked, not looking up from the book he was reading. "Maybe, baby. If he wants to and if he does what the judge said he has to do." "Do you want him to?" The question caught her off guard. Not because she didn't know the answer, but because she realized Jaden was old enough now to understand complicated feelings. "I want whatever is best for you," she said carefully. "If your daddy can learn to be the kind of father you deserve, then yes. But if he can't, then we'll keep being happy just the 2 of us." "And Ms. Ruby and Mr. David?" Denise smiled. David had become a regular presence in their lives over the past few months. Not as her boyfriend, they were taking things very slowly, but as a friend who fixed things around the house and took Jaden to baseball games and treated them both with the kind of steady kindness that Denise was learning to trust. Yes, and Ms. Ruby and Mr. David and all our friends. Good, Jaden said, turning a page. 'Cause I like our life now. So did she. The $400 a month in child support made a huge difference in their budget. Denise was able to put money into savings for the first time in her life. She bought Jaden new clothes that fit properly instead of hand-me-downs. She could afford to take him to the movies or out for pizza without worrying about how she would pay rent. But more importantly, the court ruling had given her something she hadn't expected: closure. She wasn't waiting for Robert to change anymore. Wasn't hoping he would wake up one day and realize what he had lost. Wasn't living in the shadow of what their marriage had been or what it might have become. She was building something entirely new. A month after the court date, Denise was promoted again at Walmart, this time to administrative assistant for the store manager. It came with a salary instead of hourly wages, health insurance, and 2 weeks of paid vacation. "You've earned it," Pete told her as he handed her the paperwork. "You're reliable, you're smart, and you treat people with respect. Those are rare qualities." That weekend, Denise did something she had never done before. She took Jaden shopping for furniture. Real furniture bought new instead of found or given to them. They picked out a dining room table with 4 chairs, a small wooden set that would fit in their tiny dining area. Jaden chose a bright blue chair cushion while Denise selected cream-colored ones for the other seats. "This is really ours?" Jaden asked as the delivery men set up the table. "We bought it ourselves?" "We did, baby." That night, they ate dinner at their new table instead of on the couch like they usually did. Denise had made Jaden's favorite meal, spaghetti and meatballs with garlic bread, and they ate by candlelight like they were celebrating something special. Which Denise realized they were. They were celebrating independence. Self-sufficiency. The quiet victory of a woman who had rebuilt her life from nothing but determination and the help of good people. "Mama," Jaden said, twirling spaghetti around his fork, "are you happy now?" "Yes, baby. I'm happy now." "Good. You smile more than you used to." Out of the mouths of babes. 2 weeks later, David asked her out on a real date. Not just hanging around the house fixing things or taking Jaden to play baseball. A real, grown-up date to a nice restaurant downtown. Denise's first instinct was to say no. She had Jaden to think about. She wasn't ready. She needed more time. But then she thought about what Carmen had said months ago. It was okay to remember that she was a woman and not just a mama. "Okay," she said, surprising them both. "But I'll need to find a babysitter." "Ms. Ruby already said she'd watch Jaden," David said with a grin. "I may have already asked her." "You were pretty confident I'd say yes." "I was hopeful." "There's a difference." The restaurant David chose was small and intimate, with soft lighting and jazz music playing in the background. Not fancy enough to make Denise feel out of place, but nice enough to make her feel special. She wore the black dress she had bought for court appearances, with her grandmother's pearl earrings and lipstick she rarely had occasion to wear. Looking at herself in the bathroom mirror before they left, she barely recognized the confident woman staring back at her. "You look beautiful," David said when he picked her up, and she could tell he meant it. Over dinner they talked about everything and nothing. His job at the shipping company. Her plans to maybe take some college classes now that her schedule was more stable. Books they had read. Movies they wanted to see. He didn't ask about Robert or the divorce or the court case. He didn't treat her like a victim who needed rescuing. He talked to her like she was exactly what she was, an interesting woman worth getting to know. "Can I ask you something?" David said as they shared dessert, chocolate cake that was almost as good as the one she made from scratch. "Sure. What do you want?" Not for Jaden, not for anyone else. "What do you want for yourself?" No one had asked her that question in years. Maybe ever. "I want to matter," she said without thinking, then felt her cheeks warm with embarrassment. "That probably sounds silly." "It doesn't sound silly at all. You do matter, you know. To Jaden, to Ms. Ruby, to the people at work who depend on you. To me. To you. Denise, you're one of the strongest people I've ever met. You took a situation that would have broken a lot of people and you turned it into something beautiful. You raised a son who's kind and smart and happy despite everything he's been through. You built a life that matters." Driving home that night, Denise felt lighter than she had in months. Not because David had said nice things about her, but because she was beginning to believe they were true. She was strong. She had turned pain into purpose. She had raised a son who was thriving despite his father's abandonment. She mattered. When they got back to the duplex, Ms. Ruby met them on the porch with a knowing smile. "Boys asleep," she said. "Been good as gold all evening. Y'all have fun." Yes, ma'am, Denise said, unable to stop smiling. Good. About time you remembered you're a woman with needs and dreams of your own. After Ms. Ruby went home and David left with a sweet, gentle kiss on her front porch, Denise checked on Jaden. He was sleeping peacefully, arms wrapped around his stuffed elephant, looking younger than his 7 years. She thought about the life she was giving him. Not perfect but good. Stable. Full of people who loved him and showed up for him consistently. She thought about the life she was building for herself. A job she enjoyed. A home she had made beautiful with her own hands and the help of friends. The possibility of love with a man who saw her worth. She thought about Robert, probably lying awake somewhere wondering what went wrong. How a sure thing like Candace had turned out to be another disappointment. How the woman he had called his greatest mistake was thriving without him. But thinking about Robert didn't hurt anymore. It was like remembering a bad dream that had lost its power to frighten her. She was free of him in every way that mattered. Free to be happy. Free to love and be loved. Free to raise her son without walking on eggshells or making excuses. Free to be exactly who she was meant to be. And that night, for the first time in over a year, Denise Brown fell asleep with a smile on her face and hope in her heart for tomorrow. 1 year later, Denise stood in the bathroom of the community center, adjusting her cap and gown in the mirror. At 33, she was finally walking across a stage to receive her associate degree in business administration. It had taken 2 years of night classes and online courses, studying after Jaden went to bed and during her lunch breaks, but she had done it. "Mama, you look like a real teacher," Jaden said from behind her, and she turned to see her 8-year-old son grinning at her with pride that made her heart swell. "Not a teacher, baby. But maybe someday I'll run my own business." Like what kind of business? She had been thinking about that a lot lately. The administrative skills she had learned at Walmart, combined with her business degree, had opened up possibilities she had never considered before. Maybe a consulting service for small businesses. Maybe something in nonprofit work, helping other women in situations like hers. I don't know yet. But I know I want to help people. They walked out to the main hall where families were gathering for the graduation ceremony. Denise scanned the crowd and felt overwhelmed by gratitude at what she saw. Ms. Ruby was there in her Sunday best, holding a bouquet of flowers from her garden. Carmen had come with her 3 kids, all dressed up and excited to watch Tia Denise graduate. David was there with his camera, ready to capture every moment. Even Pete and several of her co-workers from Walmart had come to support her. But the surprise that made her eyes fill with tears was seeing Pastor Brown from the church she and Jaden had started attending. He had become a mentor to her over the past year, helping her work through the anger and hurt from her marriage in a way that focused on healing rather than bitterness. "Look at this turnout," Pastor Brown said, giving her a warm hug. "This is what it looks like when a woman has built a real community around herself." As the ceremony began, Denise thought about the journey that had brought her to this moment. 3 years ago, she had been a woman who accepted being spit on in her own living room. Who believed she deserved whatever scraps of love she was given. Who was too scared to imagine a life bigger than the small world someone else had created for her. Now she was a college graduate with a career plan and a savings account and a son who had never once seen her accept less than she deserved. When they called her name, Denise Brown, Associate of Arts in Business Administration, summa cum laude, the cheers from her section were so loud that other families turned to look. Walking across that stage, shaking hands with the dean, receiving that diploma, Denise felt like she was accepting more than just a degree. She was accepting the truth of who she had always been underneath the fear and self-doubt. She was a woman who could do hard things. Who could rebuild her life from nothing. Who could raise a son to be proud of his mama. Who could love and be loved in return. After the ceremony, they all went to Ms. Ruby's house for a celebration dinner. The older woman had spent days cooking fried chicken and mac and cheese and cornbread and collard greens and sweet potato pie that tasted like love made edible. Speech. Carmen called out when everyone had filled their plates. The graduate has to make a speech. Denise stood up, feeling nervous and grateful and overwhelmed all at once. She looked around the room at the faces of people who had become her family. Not by blood but by choice. "I don't know what to say except thank you," she began. 3 years ago I thought my life was over. I thought I had lost everything that mattered. But what I learned is that sometimes when you lose everything you thought you wanted, you find everything you actually needed. She looked at Jaden, who was trying to sneak a second piece of pie while Ms. Ruby wasn't looking. I needed to learn that I was strong enough to take care of my son and myself. I needed to learn that accepting help isn't weakness, it's wisdom. I needed to learn that I deserved love that didn't come with conditions or cruelty. Her eyes found David's across the room. And I needed to learn that sometimes the best thing that can happen to you is having someone show you who they really are before it's too late to get away. Everyone laughed at that, including Denise. So thank you. For seeing something in me that I couldn't see in myself. For showing up when I needed you. For teaching me that family isn't just about who you're related to, it's about who shows up for you when it matters. The applause was warm and long, and Denise sat down feeling like she had said exactly what needed saying. Later that evening, after everyone had gone home and Jaden was in bed, Denise and David sat on her front porch swing, another gift from the community that had appeared one day with no note attached. So what's next? David asked, his arm around her shoulders. I've been thinking about that. Pete offered me a promotion to assistant manager, but I think I want to try something different. Like what? There's a nonprofit downtown that helps women transition out of domestic violence situations. They need someone to run their job placement program. It doesn't pay as much as the Walmart job, but it would let you help other women find what you found. Exactly. David was quiet for a moment, and Denise could tell he was thinking carefully about what to say next. Can I tell you something? He said finally. Always. That first day I saw you at Walmart, you looked like you were carrying the weight of the world. Like you were afraid someone was going to yell at you for existing. And I thought to myself, that's a woman who's been hurt. Denise felt her chest tighten, remembering how small she had felt back then. But watching you these past 2 years, watching you build this life, raise that boy, go back to school, stand up for yourself, I've never seen anything more beautiful than watching someone discover their own strength. He turned to face her more fully. I love you, Denise. Not because I think you need rescuing. Not because I want to fix you. I love you because you're already whole. Because you're fierce and kind and smart and beautiful. Because watching you love that boy teaches me what real love looks like. Tears slipped down Denise's cheeks, but they were good tears. Happy tears. I love you too, she whispered. But David, I need you to know that Jaden and I were a package deal. And he comes first, always. I wouldn't want it any other way. That boy is part of what makes you who you are. And besides, he grinned, somebody's got to teach him how to throw a proper curveball. They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the sounds of their neighborhood settling in for the night. Kids calling to each other from backyards. Front doors closing. The distant sound of someone's music playing softly. Denise? David said after a while. Yeah. Whatever happened to that guy? Robert? She had wondered when he would ask. David had never pushed for details about her previous marriage, never acted jealous or threatened by her past. But she knew he was curious. Last I heard from Jessica, he never showed up for the anger management classes. Never used his visitation rights. Child support comes out of his paycheck automatically, but that's the only connection we have. Does Jaden ask about him? Sometimes. Less than he used to. I think he's starting to understand that some people aren't capable of being what you need them to be, no matter how much you love them. Smart kid. Gets that from his mama? She said with a smile. Yes, he does. As they prepared to go inside, Denise's phone buzzed with a text message. She almost ignored it. She had learned to put her phone away during time with David and Jaden, but something made her check. The message was from an unknown number. Saw your graduation announcement in the paper. Congratulations. You deserve all the good things coming your way. A friend who's been watching you grow. Denise frowned, trying to figure out who it might be from. Then she noticed there was a photo attached. It was a picture of her from the graduation ceremony, walking across the stage with the biggest smile on her face. But it wasn't taken from the audience. It was taken from the side, as if someone had been standing in the wings. A chill ran down her spine as she realized who must have sent it. Everything okay? David asked, noticing her expression. Denise looked at the message again, then at the photo. For a moment she felt that old fear creeping back. The feeling of being watched, being followed, being at someone else's mercy. Then she looked around at her life. Her home. Her community. Her strength. And she deleted the message without responding. Everything's perfect, she told David, and meant it. Because whatever games Robert wanted to play, whatever way he was trying to insert himself back into her story, it didn't matter. She wasn't the same woman he had broken 3 years ago. She wasn't afraid of him anymore. She had built something beautiful from the ashes of what he had destroyed. She had raised a son who knew his worth. She had found love with a man who valued her strength instead of trying to diminish it. She had created a life that was entirely her own. And no one, not Robert, not anyone, could take that away from her now. That night, as she tucked Jaden into bed, her son looked up at her with serious eyes. "Mama, are you going to marry Mr. David?" The question caught her off guard. "Why do you ask?" "Because he looks at you the way princes look at princesses in movies. Like you're the most beautiful thing in the world." Denise's heart melted. "Would you be okay with that? If someday Mama and Mr. David got married?" Jaden considered this with the gravity of someone much older than 8. "Yeah," he said finally. "Because he's nice to you. And he's nice to me. And he makes you laugh the way you're supposed to laugh." "The way I'm supposed to laugh? Like you're not afraid it's going to get taken away." Sometimes children saw things that adults spent years learning to understand. "I love you, baby," she said, kissing his forehead. "I love you too, Mama. And I'm proud of you for graduating college." "Thank you, sweet boy." As she turned off his light and closed his door, Denise thought about the woman she had been when Jaden was born. Young and scared and so dependent on Robert's approval that she had lost herself completely. That woman would never have imagined this life. Would never have believed she could raise a son who was confident and kind and proud of his mama. Would never have dreamed she could find love that felt safe and steady and real. But that woman had been stronger than she knew. She had survived. She had protected her child. She had found the courage to leave when leaving felt impossible. And now, standing in the hallway of her own home, surrounded by the life she had built with her own hands and the help of people who chose to love her, Denise Brown finally understood something that had taken her 33 years to learn. She had never been anyone's greatest mistake. She had always been her own greatest victory. And that victory belonged to no one but her.